Okay, well, thank you for showing up. Appreciate it. A few disclaimers tonight. This is a primer, okay? So I hope to prime you to be motivated and encouraged to go home and study about Satan or the devil. You know, go to get a good dictionary of the Bible. Look up every word that has Satan and every passage that has the devil, and read it. Put it in context, take some notes, pray about it, and study. This is just a primer to get things going. Maybe do one more. I'm not talking about his schemes tonight. I'm not going to talk about how we overcome them, although you'll know some of that stuff, I'm sure. I'm going to talk about basically some things about him that you already know probably, maybe some things you don't, what he is not, and what he is. And then we're going to have some questions at the end to discuss, and I'll lay those out. It's very interesting to me, during our men's retreat, and I wanted to start there because Steve Brand, he's a friend of mine. We knew him in South Carolina. He was a campus minister there. And then he was chosen by that church to plant the church in St. Louis. And he did. And then he came back to South Carolina, to Columbia, and then he went on to Boston. And there he was a campus minister. And I think he became an evangelist. And then he left the ministry and he got his master's in counseling. He has 26,000 plus hours of individual counseling, as well as being a life coach. And when he came to our retreat, he introduced Warriors of God in this way. He talked about the fact that there are things about warriors that we should know. They look out for others, for instance, in war, in disasters, things like that. They endure hardship. So do Christians. And we look out for one another. They see things that others don't see, because we have the right picture of reality, because we're looking through the eyeglasses of the mind of God. They make a science of war. They study it. And this is the point that I want to bring up now. They study their enemy. And they know their enemy in order to defeat them. Mm-hmm. And he pointed out that Satan is our enemy. Now this guy has thousands of hours of counseling. And he's dealt with people with a lot of negative ideas, negative actions, negative behavior, a lot of things in life. Not only in counseling, but also in life counseling or life coaching. And he said, you know, lots of our thoughts 24/7 come from the devil. This is his experience. I thought that was an interesting statement. And then that's when he said, well, our enemy is Satan. 24/7, 360 days a year. And a lot of our problems come from our thoughts. And a lot of those come from Satan. And then he talks about, you can turn over to Revelation 12. And this is because you're going to see something about Satan here. Now, Revelation is a very highly symbolical book. If you get into making it literal, you're going to go down a very steep hill and you're going to be on some very thin ice. It wasn't intended to be literal, but he talks about the dragon, beginning in verse 4 through 11. And he says, he swept his tail a third of the stars. No, I don't want to stay there. War broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon hurled down the ancient serpent, called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. And then it says, he tried, down in verse 12, I'm just going to paraphrase it. He's waiting there for a male child to be born, and the child is born, but he's not able to destroy the child. And then, in verse 17, it says, then the dragon was enraged at the woman. He chased her and she escaped into the wilderness, which was apparently Israel. The dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, which are us. And in those days, the Christians. Those who keep God's commands and hold fast their testimony about Jesus. And that was his point. Satan went to war with Christians. And they were experiencing it at the time Revelation was written. And John answers the war that Satan is taking against him in this particular time with Revelation. But I just thought it was interesting. Steve uses this to say, here is our enemy. This little particular passage is a metaphor, to me, for Matthew chapter 2, 16 through 18. You can go over there if you like. But this is where, Matthew 2, 16 through 18. This is where the Magi, the wise men come, right? They're looking for Jesus. They see the star, and Herod hears about it, and so he calls them in. He says, "Well, you go worship him when you go worship him, find him, and let me know, and I'll come and worship." I'm just kind of telling the story here. And then, of course, in a dream, they're told to go back home another way. So they fool Herod, and when Herod finds out, what does he do? He kills all the children in the vicinity of Bethlehem from 2 years and under. There is Satan personified. And that little metaphor over, and to me, Revelation 12 is what happened here in reality. Do you see how wicked Herod was? Well, who inspired him?
Yeah.
Who was his boss? It was Satan. Satan's behind this whole thing. From the very beginning, the time that Jesus was born, Satan was after him. So he is our enemy because we're the followers of Jesus Christ. Well, as followers of Jesus Christ, we ought to know something about Satan. He is real. Now, I don't have to tell you that. My wife doesn't want me to use this, but I'm preaching to the choir. Sorry, Barbara. You know what that means? Everybody agrees with it. We're in the choir together. You understand that. I understand that you understand that. But I'm going to preach to the choir anyway. But no, there are lots of people that don't believe in old Satan. So we should be able to talk intelligently to them about Satan and point them to the Scriptures in a very realistic way and with what we know from the Bible and share that with them. Plus, it's good for us as members of the choir, that as Christians, we need to know our enemy.
Yeah.
And we really do need to know our enemy. And that's what that's about tonight.
Yeah.
He can think, he can plan ahead, he can devise, scheme, he can put obstacles in front of us, he can put problems out there, he can lie, cheat, steal, just like we can. In fact, Denninger suggested when I couldn't speak the other Wednesday night that maybe Satan was after me because I chose the wrong topic. I didn't think of that until he said it. I wasn't thinking very smart about my enemy, was I? Thank you, brother. He put me onto that. He can cause all kinds of evil problems for we humans. So there's nothing new under the sun about this for us. But as I said, there are other people that don't know. Some today think Satan, like the Bible, is for, another time, another era, Because we're very, very sophisticated today. We're so educated, technologically advanced. We live in a scientific age, not in the Dark Ages, which was really full of superstition and old wives' tales, and Satan is one of those. He's a relic from the past. The Bible's a relic from the past. Basically, that's what secular humanism, in a nutshell, has been teaching for a long, long time. God is dead, man is now God. I mean, we have the answer to everything. We're so smart, so educated, and so sophisticated. So we don't need the Bible. And indeed, you have to attack the veracity and the truthfulness of Scripture if you're going to debunk the idea that Satan's real. Because the Bible is full of Satan. It assumes his existence. It never tried to prove it. Never. It doesn't try to prove the existence of God. Paul gives a few arguments in Romans 1 about God, but basically the Bible assumes the existence of God and it assumes the existence of Satan from the get-go. The Bible teaches it. We know that. Jesus taught about it, did he not? He did. How many times was he tested and tempted by Satan? 3 times. Imagine the audacity and the arrogance of Satan to challenge the Son of God about his own identity. That's pretty bold. That's his nature. He's afraid of nothing. Except it does say if we resist him, he'll flee from us. We're not going to talk about how we resist him. You probably know more about that than I do. When I think of that, I just love to think of a chicken running from a fox. Now, if you give a chicken some space, it's tough for a fox to catch. Those boys are quick. I've chased down chickens. Thankfully, they were barricaded by a fence in my aunt's chicken coop, which was pretty, as big as this room back here. So I chased them pretty good. They can move. And that's how I perceive old Satan moving like a chicken and a little fox after him. I know it's crazy.
It's good visual.
But anyway, you get an idea who he is, how he thinks, what his character is, how he behaves when he attacks the Son of God. 3 times he challenged Jesus and tempted him. Do you think Jesus thought that was a figment of his imagination? No. He was real to Jesus. And he's real to us. There are all kinds of passages, you've read them, about Jesus casting out demons. Matthew 12, 22 through 33. He cast out a demon, and the Pharisees charged him with complicity with Satan. Well, Jesus destroyed their faulty logic. He just says, come on. Satan wants to expand his kingdom, not destroy his kingdom by himself. So he's not going to do that. And he exposed their self-absorbed, egotistical, legalistic hearts. That's what they were. And he said, you can't take the goods from a strong man unless you can go in and bind him. Who was the strong man? Satan. Who bound him? Jesus did. When he cast out a demon. When he healed somebody. He was binding the strong man because he's stronger. Luke 13, I love this story. A woman is bound. She's been over 18 years. Jesus heals her. And she was unbound. And what does the synagogue leader say? He said to Jesus and the people, there are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath. 2 people were bound in this story. The woman, who could be healed and was, and the ruler of the synagogue. He was bound by his legalistic, pharisaical, arrogant, religious heart. And Jesus couldn't unbind him because he didn't see his sin. But Jesus did heal the lady. Again, it was an encounter with Satan. And Jesus believed that Satan was real, and he healed the woman. Paul believed that Satan was real. Peter believed Satan was real. James believed Satan was real. Paul believed that, he said, he was afraid that as Eve was tempted by the serpent in the garden, the people in Corinth were going to be led away too and tempted to think otherwise than what Paul taught them. Now, it doesn't say Satan there, but obviously Satan's behind the serpent. Peter says in 1 Peter 5, 8, and 9, your enemy, the devil, is a roaring lion seeking to devour you. In the context, I think that's persecution. He's going to devour you by persecution in the context of 1 Peter. But he'll devour us any way he can. And the way he attacks us is probably different for everybody because my weaknesses may not be yours. Yours may not be mine. But if he sees a weakness, he's going to come after it. And yet there are some schemes we'll talk about another time that I think he comes at with us, everybody at with. And then James said, submit to God, resist the devil. So he believed in the devil. He even said that demons believe, and I think they're his angels, and shudder. They tremble. So these guys all believed that Satan was real. Just like you and I are real. He's just as real as you are right now. And as I said, his reality has been assumed. And it's also been assumed in the Bible. Number one, he is not infinite. He's finite. He's a finite being. He's not infinite. He's beyond the here and now. He's different than the material world that you and I live in. He's a spirit being. We can't see or experience him, I don't believe, unless we meet somebody with the 5 physical senses. But I mean, as a being, he is a spirit being. And we don't experience him like I can experience my wife by shaking her hand. Unless, of course, there's somebody in there. I'm not saying not dead. Somebody in there. Well, anyway. But we see the consequences of his destruction in our own lives, in the lives of other people, with our 5 physical senses. All the time, I believe.
Yeah.
He's much more powerful than we are, but he's not as powerful as God is. We can see this in Job 1 and Job 2. I call it, he's supranatural. S-U-P-R-A. It's my own little terminology. You don't have to buy into it, but he's not supernatural. Supernatural to me belongs to God, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. But not to Satan. He's supernatural. He's beyond what we are. But he And so he's not as powerful as God is. And you see that in Job 1 and 2. God said to Satan, where have you been? All to and fro. He wasn't everywhere present. He's not everywhere present. He has his demons everywhere, but he's not everywhere present, according to that verse, in my opinion. And then, how much power did he have over Job? Well, he had quite a bit of power, did he not? But could he take his life? No. Who said? God said. Yeah, you can destroy his crops, and you can destroy his donkeys and his camels and kill his kids, but don't take his life or don't harm him. And then he said, well, skin for skin, when Job didn't give in. Well, go ahead, afflict him with something, but you can't take his life with it. So he was on a leash. He's still on a leash. He doesn't have all power. He has limits on him by the Father. However, he does have a lot of power. Look at the power he had to destroy everything Job had, including his health. And he'd like to do that to you and me. He'd like to send us to hell with him and his angels, but he'd also like to hurt us physically and materially and mentally and emotionally. And I think he does that to a lot of people. And I think that's what Steve Brand was talking about when he says a lot of our thinking and the people that he's dealt with comes from Satan, and he's done a lot of damage in their minds and their hearts, mentally and physically and spiritually and emotionally. So he is not infinite. He's a finite being. He is also, his name is not Lucifer. He's not Lucifer, folks. That's over in Isaiah 13 and 14. Also, some think it's in Ezekiel 26, 27, and 28. But in Isaiah 14, 12 through 17, especially verses 12 through 15, it says, how you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of dawn. In the context, this is a reference to the king of Babylon, not Satan. That's very clear from the beginning of Isaiah 13 through Isaiah 14. It's the king of Babylon. What king of Babylon? I don't know. I don't know. We'll suggest one. But morning star, day star, is probably a reference to Venus. Venus is the brightest morning. It's not a star, it's a planet. But when it rises in the morning, it looks like a star. And it's the brightest of the planets out there in the morning. So it does look like a star. And that's probably what it was a reference to, because the king of Babylon was so prideful, he thought he was as great and glorious as a constellation in the sky. And God's going to prove him wrong. He's going to, the king of Babylon's going to have something more than he can handle, is what's going to happen. Nebuchadnezzar, and the next one, Belshazzar, in chapter 5. But he considered himself that glorious, that magnificent, that great, because he was this great king. But he's not compared to God. Lucifer is a transliteration of the Hebrew word. Transliteration means and this is Hebrew, they took a letter here in Hebrew and they put it over here in English, because Hebrew goes this way, just like Arabic does. And I've studied Arabic. So they took the word, one letter here, put it here, took another, and it turned out Lucifer in English. That's all it is. It's not a translation of the Hebrew terms. It's the transliteration. The King James picks it up, and of course, they've used it, people have used that for a long time. I'll tell you, go over to Daniel chapter 4, and you read there about Nebuchadnezzar. And I don't have time to read all this. But this is why I said it's a primer. So Joseph is going to go home tonight and read it himself. So is the rest of you. No, what is it? Well, he has this great dream. This tree is cut down. None of his astrologers or chanters or wise men can tell the interpretation, so he calls in Daniel. And Daniel says, hey, it's about you, buddy, because you're too prideful. And you need to repent, basically. And a year later, he had it. He was out on his roof, looking at his magnificent kingdom, and he starts bragging to himself how great and magnificent Babylon is that he had made. And about the time that he says that, a voice comes from heaven and says, buddy, you're going out here and live like the animals and eat grass like an ox. And that's exactly what he did for 7 times. And 7 times just means it's a period of time that has a beginning and an end. It's not indefinite. I don't know how long it is, but it isn't going to last forever. And after 7 times, he realized that God is sovereign not him. Well, that fits in pretty good with what he says here in Isaiah 14 about the king of Babylon, who thought he was this bright morning star. Maybe it is. I don't know. You go to the next chapter, chapter 5, and you get Belshazzar, who's more arrogant than Nebuchadnezzar because he knew what had happened to Nebuchadnezzar, as Daniel points out, when the handwriting on the wall comes, and he asks Daniel to interpret it. And Daniel points out, you knew all this from your ancestor, and you didn't do anything about it. In fact, you mocked God by drinking out of it. So he was more prideful, and guess what happened to him? He lost his life that night. So maybe it's about him. But the point is, it's not about Satan. It's about the king of Babylon. When our kids were growing up, they had a little storybook, a Bible storybook, done by Concordia Press, of the Missouri Synod of the Lutheran Church. They have these good little, we still have them. We've had them for 40 years. We used to, when Angela was about 2.5 or 3, Barbara, we would read it, and it had a little da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And man, you could start the first sentence, and Angela would finish the next 3. She was just a little girl. She just bam, bam, bam right off. Because it was the rhyme. And she picked up that rhyme. Plus, she's smart like her mother. I had to say that. But the braggy king of Babylon, and that's what Isaiah 13 and 14 are about. You go to Ezekiel 26 and 27, it's a lament about the great seafaring and trade genius city of Tyre. That's what it's about. And then you get to 28, verses 1 through 20, it's a lament against the king of Tyre, not Satan, like the king of Babylon, because he got haughty. For a small city-state, they were a big deal in their day because they ruled the sea. They were very rich and wealthy because they were all over the known world at the time. Seafarers, bringing goods from all over the world and trading with all kinds of people. And that puffed them up.
Yeah.
God says, I'm going to hammer you too. And he does. Hammer him under, I think it was, Alexander the Great. But anyway, I would say this, behind all of this pride and all these kings, the instigator, the motivator is, guess who? It is Satan. He's behind the scenes. He's behind the curtain. But the guy on the stage is the king of Babylon and also the king of Tyre. Now you read 28, 1 through 20, a lot of people say, that's a picture of Satan because he's in the garden, he's like an angel, and all of that. Well, if it is, this is the only place that ever shows that about Satan. You don't see him like that in Genesis 3 when you first see him. And you don't see him like that in Revelation 12. He's an enemy of God. He's fighting the angels. He's never presented that way. So he is the instigator, but that's not what it's about. And lastly, he's not the victor in his war against us in the here and now. He doesn't have victory here and now. And he doesn't have it ultimately. But I'm interested in here and now. My friend and guest speaker, Steve Brand, when he was talking to us in the men's retreat, he said, you can defeat any sin in your life. Any sin now. No matter what it is. And he's worked with all these people, and he's seen these changes. His was anger. And he said, I've hurt my wife, I hurt my kids, I hurt relationships with my brothers and sisters because I was an angry guy for years. Even as a minister, Bible campus minister, what have you. And then he said, not anymore. Kind of calmly, not cocky, but with confidence. I like it in the movie Miracle. And it's the night they're going to play the Russians. And the coach says, I'm tired. I'm tired of hearing how good the Russians are. And being, and maybe 9 out of 10 times they would beat us. But not tonight. I like the way he says that. And that's the way Steve Brand came across to me. Not anymore. That sin is not beating me anymore. And I was impacted by that. And he was serious. Satan is not he does not defeat us now. You go over to Revelation 12 again, 9 through 12 and verse 17. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled down to earth and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before God day and night, has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short. But here, this is not future victory. We have victory because of Jesus Christ's blood. His death, burial, and resurrection. That overcame Satan. Yeah, we still die. Yeah, we still have to fight him. But he was defeated in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. This is not future. There's very little in the book of Revelation that you won't find in the rest of the New Testament. It's just when you get to Revelation, there's a lot of allegory and symbolism and similes and metaphors that you don't get in Romans, or you don't get in John, or you don't get in Colossians. But it's there. This is no different than the fact that some other passages in the New Testament that Jesus was raised from the dead. Hebrews 2:4. He overcame the power of death. He says that Satan had it worse. We don't have to fear death anymore. We're going to be resurrected. So we don't have to fear it. And be captive by it. And enslaved by it. And then in John 20:30-31, especially verse 31, I think it is. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the ruler of this world be cast out. That's before Jesus goes to the cross, dies on the cross, and is resurrected. But when that happens, Satan is beaten. He's finished. I mean, he's still here, but he's not going to be the victor. And then, even though Romans 8:32-37 doesn't bring Satan up, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And then what does he deal with? Neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities. Principalities? Death? Who had control of those things? Who runs those now? But they don't have power over us ultimately. But even in this life, he doesn't have power over us. We're not going to discuss that tonight. There's just a lot to that. So these are things he's not. There are other things. Here's what he is. He is our number one enemy, not flesh and blood. When we have a conflict or issues in our relationships or other things, yes, we're arguing with people. Yes, we're dealing with individuals. And we have our sin. But we need to think maybe behind all of this is what? Or who? Satan. Satan is behind a lot of that. In the parable of the weeds, Matthew 13:36-42, Jesus said the guy who sowed the weeds was who? Satan. The devil. He's our enemy. He called him the enemy. Jesus called him our enemy. And Ephesians 6:12. We are not contending or fighting against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the world rulers of this present age. This is the Revised Standard Version. Darkness. Against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places or realms. That's who we're fighting against. And Satan is leading. So that's one thing he is. He's also, well, he was a murderer from the beginning, and he is still a murderer. John 8:44. Jesus said he was a murderer from the very beginning. Yeah. Who led to the death, or what led to the death of Adam and Eve? Spiritually and physically. Was it not Satan's lie to them and Satan's temptation to them that they gave in to? But he instigated it and he started it, and so they lost their lives. Man began to die then physically and spiritually. They were separated from God. He's a murderer from the beginning. He still is. There's no truth in him. Jesus said in John 8:44. No truth. He's a liar, and the father lies because he speaks according to his nature. Do you really think when Satan said, if you bow down to me, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world, do you really think he would have given him those kingdoms? Not on your life. That was a lie. Jesus would have bowed down to him and been enslaved. He wouldn't have gotten any of those kingdoms. Satan doesn't tell the truth, ever. Even though it may appear to him, he never tells the truth. It's not in his nature. He is a liar, and the father lies. It speaks according to his own nature or his own value system. He wouldn't have given Jesus those kingdoms. Not at all. 1 John 3:8, he was sinning from the very beginning. It says, from the beginning, he was a sinner. The point is, I'm just saying this, He's always evil, intent on nothing but spiritual destruction, as well as the kind of destruction that he brought on Job. Yes, he wants to destroy us spiritually, but any other way he can. He'll do it. Now, so he is and was a murderer. He is the prince of the power of the air, who has worked in the sons of disobedience, Ephesians 2, 1 and 2. He is the spirit of disobedience. Period. I challenge you, go study the sin lists in the New Testament. Where are they? We have them. Romans 1's a sin list, isn't it? Galatians 5, we know that one well, don't we? We have nightmares about that. 2 Timothy 3, 1 Corinthians 6, there's a list there of sins. He epitomizes every one of those lists. That's who he is. He's all of those sins. All of them. It's the way he thinks. It's the way he talks. It's the way he acts. It's what he tries to get us to do. That's how he lives his life. That pleases him. That's all he does. That's who he is. Those sin lists. And he's on steroids with that. He is. He's nothing but evil. This is his personality. That's who he is. He is also, or can be, an angel of light, and so can his angels, or demons, and I believe they're the same for me. That's 2 Corinthians 11, 13 through 15. Because there, Paul said there were certain apostles, these super apostles there, were saying, oh, well, Paul can't compare to us. We're super. Well, he's saying they're super apostles. They were saying they're better than Paul, because Paul didn't take any support from the Corinthians, and we'll take support in some other things. And so, but these were really, Paul said, false apostles, servants of Satan, masquerading as angels of light. And he said, indeed, Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. He's a con man. He's an imposter. He's a fake. He's a fraud. He's false. He can't be. He's an expert in disguises. How about a wolf in sheep's clothing?
Yeah.
How about a snake in the form of a dove? How about an angel of light who's really an angel of death? All kinds of disguises. And the disguises will probably, as I said before, be different from you than me, because your weaknesses are not mine and mine may not be yours. So he'll come at you the way he can get you. He is a master of disguise. Yes. And lastly, but not least, he is persistent. Like with Jesus, it says in Luke, I think, with his testing in the doing, he left him for an opportune time. That's what he'll wait for. But he's persistent. And I think he's patient. But he is persistent. So we have to be just as persistent. Because if we're not, then that's when he takes us down. Well, one other thing I want to say here, in all of this, we can't blame Satan for our sins and our mistakes. You guys don't remember, what was his name? The comedian. I forget. Anyway, he said the devil made me do it.
Flip Wilson.
Flip Wilson. Study Flip Wilson. Also, not only study your Bible, go do a history on Flip Wilson. We're combining Hollywood and... No, I'm just kidding. But no, he said, oh, the devil made me do it. And he made that famous in the 70s. Well, we can't make it famous. We can't say, the devil made me do it. Now, he's there. He's very... he just can tempt us in a lot of ways. He is just all kinds of things. But remember James 1, 13 through 15. Our desires, when conceived, lead forth to sin. And sin, when it gives birth, or is full-blown, leads to death. I'm paraphrasing, because I don't have time. You read that. James 1, 13 through 15. We have to check our desires all the time. Because he can take those, turn them into sin, and that turns into death. So we have that responsibility on us. We can't blame Satan. Now, we need to be aware of them, obviously. And we can escape temptations. 1 Corinthians 10, 13. There's no temptation that has overcome you that is not yet common to man. But with the temptation, God will what? Provide the way of escape. We have to believe that. We have to believe that. We just have to. And if we don't, we need to pray about it and talk to others and get help and study and pray. We have to believe that. Amen. And God will provide the way of escape. Satan is our enemy. A real live enemy. Out to destroy our faith and our walk with God. not our brothers and sisters, not others, even though we may have issues with one another and all that. It's really, we're fighting against, not flesh and blood, but the spiritual realms of wickedness that Satan is controlling. He just is. He's very powerful. He's very real, but he's limited by God. God has him on a leash. He does. And yet he's still very powerful. We have to realize that. He is the epitome of sin and evil and wants us to live as he does. We must get to know him and his tactics and his schemes and how we can fight against him, and then apply what we learn. We'll talk about that at another time. We need to know our enemy. I played high school and college football, and one of the best things we did, we got scouting reports on the team we were going to play. And that was the best thing we ever got, because we knew our enemy. And one night we had this guy, I'm bragging here a little bit. We had this guy who was catching 12 passes a game. He was an all-state wide receiver. Those days he'd be called a flanker. And he was fast. But we studied the films on this dude. He caught one pass. One pass all night. Unfortunately, it was the pass that beat us. Right there. I mean, but we shut him down. You know, because why? We were so great? No. The scouting report was so good. We knew this guy. I knew his patterns better than he did. I could have run them. I couldn't catch like him, but I could have run. But, I mean, we knew it. And that's the way we need to be studying. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, what number would describe your time spent studying about Satan? You answer that, not me. Scale of 1 to 10, would it be a 3? Would it be an 8? Why is it? Why is it the number that you're giving yourself? And be honest about it. And will that number change tonight after having had this lesson? Okay. All right? That's one thing you need to do tonight. And then secondly, what is one besetting sin or weakness in your life Satan can use against you? He can attack you with. You know it better than I do. What is it? Is it coffee, like for my wife? And Susie Denninger? Oh, no.
Is it coffee?
No. What is your one? And with me, I have several. But what's one? And how are you going to overcome it? What do you think you need to do? And talk about that. And then for homework, and you can discuss it now if you like to, you have time. What are some schemes or ways you think Satan uses to tempt you to sin and overcome it? Some schemes. I have some down here. I'm not going to talk about this tonight. And I'd like to talk about them the next time and how we overcome those. And maybe you'll give me some suggestions and some help. But anyway, that's it.